Hi, welcome back to my channel and my review for Imaginary. So the story here is about this woman who moves back into her childhood home with her new family, in which growing up she had a bad relationship with an imaginary friend. And now that she's moved back here, the youngest daughter appears also to be having a rather strange relationship with an imaginary friend, which turns this into a very nightmarish situation. So here with my first 2024 horror movie review, and it's to see this new Blumhouse release. And I did a video just the other night talking about my top 10 best Blumhouse horror movies. And I did that because this is a production company that are renowned for having such hit or miss releases. I genuinely think they've done some of the best horror movies in the last 10 to 20 years, some amazing releases, stuff like Get Out, a particular favourite of mine. But at the same time, they release tons of garbage, loads of really bad, cheap, lazy horror films that are out there purely to make a profit. And you never really know what you're going to get with them. But I wanted to give this one, Imaginary, a chance. It's been out for a week already, and I can imagine if you've seen the reviews for this, you know that it has not been received well. So my review today is really to talk about whether I think this movie is as bad as people have been making out. And the answer to that is no, I don't think it's quite as bad as people are saying, but it's still pretty bad. It's still got a lot of issues with it. It's not a movie I could recommend you go out and pay money to see, and I think they could really do so much better than they've done here. To give the film some credit though, I do think it has some decent things about it, and for me they were mainly within the first half. I think the setup of this story, there is a little bit of an element of mystery about it, and a little bit of intrigue brought up in this situation where this girl's weird relationship she's having with this imaginary friend is sort of triggering these past traumas from her stepmom, which is really the main character that we follow here. And she has a hard time remembering her childhood, difficulty piecing certain things together. And she doesn't really remember a lot of the trauma and a lot of the stuff that went on during that time. And this young girl having this weird imaginary friend relationship ends up bringing a lot of these memories back into her life and a lot of the pain they cause. So I was to some extent quite interested to see how that was all going to play out, the kind of connection between this girl and the stepmother, the fact it was already a bit of a difficult relationship given their family dynamic, and to see this kind of new problem brought into the mix as well. I was fairly intrigued by it. I do think there are some fairly good setups for some scares in the first half as well, a few creepy moments. And, you know, if you want to bring on an early heart attack, there are a lot of quite effective jump scares done here that did get me, I have to admit. Seeing this in a very loud cinema, there are a few scenes which will really get you. There's a few moments like that, and I think it is because of, as I said, there is a mystery, there is an element of the unknown about it when you're going through this. So some of the scare scenes do hold a bit of gravity to them and they do get you, but you know, I think most of these parts are all within the first half of the movie when it is more of a generic sort of haunted house story. And to give credit as well, I do think the young actress here who played the youngest daughter, she was pretty impressive. I think given how much of the role was focused on her, and you know how it can be with child actors, if they're given too much and it's not convincing enough, it can really pull you out of the story. But I think the young girl here did really well, just kind of quite an emotional points of the movie she had to play, a lot of scary moments as well, and she was pretty convincing, again, for such a young girl. I think she did a really good job with the role given how much screen time she had here. The problems for me really start to come here in the second half of the movie. And I hate to say this, but at a certain point, again, this is a spoiler-free review, so I won't go into too many details, but the second half of this story gets a lot more ambitious when you get various reveals about what's really going on in this haunting of this house, and the kind of explanations as to why everything that is occurring is. And as I said, it's creative, it is ambitious, but I just don't know if the filmmaker knew how to execute this properly, because for me, it was more of a frustrating experience than anything else. I think because when you get to this halfway point and you start getting some of these reveals, you're not kind of shown the details and left to work out for yourself what's going on. It's done in a very awkward scene where a character who comes into the picture a little bit later basically explains everything to you in a very heavy-handed way, where they're explaining exactly how this world works, why this haunting is happening, what it's because of, and all of the details. And it really took me out of the movie, because the way this situation is handled, it doesn't feel at all natural. It doesn't really feel like now you've got this family that are in a real this real nightmarish situation. It feels like I'm watching a movie and they're kind of explaining the rules to you. And at the same time, there is that kind of feeling as well where it's like, do they really think the moviegoer won't be able to understand what's going on here? You think you need to explain it in that level of detail? So there was something that just kind of sat wrong with me about that. I think the tonal shift that it takes at this point as well is a little bit jarring. And I have to mention this, but again, because there is this character that's been brought into the story at this point, they get quite a focus in the second half, and the acting and the dialogue from her was pretty terrible. I don't actually know who the actress was. I've never seen her before, but it was so bad that it was actually cringeworthy and a little bit uncomfortable to watch, because I thought it was so poorly done. And because of that, and because the movie is getting so crazy at this point and quite complicated as well in what it's trying to show you, I started to find the whole experience just a little bit frustrating and kind of wishing it was getting to the end. So there's something a bit disappointing about that, the fact that whilst this was being a generic Blumhouse horror movie, I was actually enjoying it a little bit more, and when it was actually trying to go somewhere a little bit more unique and a bit different, it really starts to fail, and that's a shame. But I guess it goes to show though that if you do want to have ambition, you want to try something different, you do need a level of talent behind the camera in the team to work with this story in order to really make it work. Otherwise it can quite easily fall flat on its face, and I think unfortunately in the second half of the movie here, that's really what starts to happen. I think there's other little contrivances as well, where the dad in this story, who's probably one of the better actors in the film, Tom Payne, I really like him and I hoped he was going to play a more integral part of the story, but they have to come up with a reason early on as to why he has to leave his new wife with the stepchildren and go away for the weekend in order for all of this to occur. Because when you really think about it afterwards, if he was in the picture, none of this could have really played out the way it did. So it's little contrivances like that, again, which kind of add to that feeling of not making the story feel like a natural experience and making you really just feel like you're watching a movie. It's a very tame film as well, and I do appreciate that it's probably aimed more at a teen audience. So I do think to some extent there will be younger teenagers, again, just getting into horror, that will probably like some things about this, because it is competently made. You know, it's got a good cast. There are elements about it that do work, and it doesn't embarrass itself. It's not a terrible film, but you know me, if you watch my channel by now, you know I'm a massive horror fan. I go out and see so many horror films every year, and when you think about how good some of the horror releases we've had, even in the last 3 or 4 years, have been, this just doesn't come anywhere close to that for me, and that's what's most disappointing about it. So when you are someone that watches a lot of horror, a movie has to do a lot better than this to impress you. I think unfortunately I'm only going to be able to give this one a 2 out of 5 rating, and I thought about giving it a 2.5, but at that rating it's kind of at a point where I didn't particularly like the movie, but I would at least consider watching it again to see if I'd have a different experience on second watch, and maybe there was a couple of bits about it that entertained me. But here, this is a movie that, I'm happy I went and saw it, but that's it. I wouldn't have any interest in ever going back to re-watch this. So that's all of my thoughts for you on Imaginary. Please, as always, do come down into the comments section and let me know what you thought of the film. Maybe this worked for some of you. I can understand why to some extent. I know some people did get a little bit more out of this movie than I did, but for me personally, there were just way too many missteps. But let me know all of your thoughts down below. Also, please do consider subscribing to my channel if you've been enjoying my content. I will also leave a link at the end of this video if you want to check out that video I did the other day talking about the top 10 best horror movies that I personally think Blumhouse have ever released. So thanks very much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.